Now, look, you guys know I'm not a huge fan of testosterone cypionate. Of the esters, cypionate, NTA, prop, phenylpropionate, if you want to use that for TRT, even sustanon, it's the hardest to dial in. But there are cases where people dial in cypionate in kind of a cookie cutter protocol. And this particular cookie cutter protocol actually does work really well for people. Not going to be everyone, so I want to make that disclaimer right off the bat. But what I want to bring you into is, first of all, a glimpse into the upcoming product Mastering Libido and Erections on TRT, surgical protocols for every ester. This is the sexual function playbook for guys on TRT, but specifically a part in here that breaks down this cypionate protocol and how to adjust it. It does include an aromatase inhibitor, and I'm going to show you how to maneuver that aromatase inhibitor to dial in on this particular protocol. And here's a hint. It's a high-dose protocol. It's a high-dose test. All right, so sit back, strap in, relax. Let me break down this protocol for you guys, the AI use, the AI dose, the adjustments to perfection for what ultimately, given a pretty crappy ester, ends up for a select set of individuals to be an incredible TRT protocol. All right, before we start the video, Cortex Labs, which is my company, is a TRT coaching and sexual dysfunction resolution company. Got a range of different products ranging from coaching. Right now, 30% off 3 and 6 month programs. What I predominantly do is fix libido, erection, climax, and sensation problems on TRT, and you can hire me in under a minute. Use the code on the screen and down the description right now to get 30% off the 3 and 6 month packages. Source list. Hey, look, I put together a vetted, proven list of hormone, anabolic, androgenic compounds and ancillaries, including high-potency DHT, boys. It is 20% off. Code's on the screen and down the description of this video. Lastly, if you need to dial in on cream or you think about switching to cream, I created the instructional video course to show you specifically how to target great sexual function on transcranial testosterone cream. You can literally buy this course and get the protocols now. It's 20% off. Code's down the description of this video. All right, so I'm going to situate myself up here to the left. Hi, I'm up here. I'm up here to the left now. I'm on the left to give you guys a look at this protocol. Then we'll talk about the adjustment notes. So let's just start with the protocol. It's 200 milligrams testosterone cypionate, 1x weekly intramuscularly. I always suggest, if you're doing a 1x weekly injection, which a lot of people do tolerate just fine, to do it intramuscularly. I mean, bolusing sub-Q cypionate does not make sense. As much as you might think it makes sense, oh, it's a slow distribution and even kill or whatever, it doesn't make sense. Despite people saying sub-Q injections will make you aromatize less, what actually happens versus intramuscular is because you really have a lot less of a trough on sub-Q, you accumulate estradiol. Whereas, you inject 200 milligrams cypionate once a week, you're going to trough. You're going to start troughing at day 5, day 6. I mean, the peak is really day 3, 3.5 or so, after which you start troughing. You inject that sub-Q, you're really not going to trough, and therefore estrogen is going to accumulate. You're going to find a lot of people that do IM injections versus sub-Q injections. They look at their bloods, and the estrogen is higher on the sub-Q injections. I suggest folks use, in this case, because you're doing it infrequently, at least a 1-inch needle, right? 1.5-inch needle, and you can get some pretty thin 1.5-inch needles on Amazon. Please go look for them. They are nearly painless, right? So that out of the way, we're doing that once a week. The day after injection, 0.25 milligrams of Arimidex. 0.25 milligrams of Arimidex. You take a milligram tablet, you get a pill cutter, you split that in fourths, or you get from a compounding pharmacy the 0.125 milligram tablets. The compounded tablets, you just take 2 of those. Again, to reiterate, you want to take the AI in these cases the day after so that you don't immediately suppress estrogen conversion. Right? You want some of that androgen to convert to estradiol in the brain and the penis and the cardiac tissues and your joint tissues, and you run a lot less risk of crushing estradiol. In this particular protocol, we want to run 125 IU of HCG daily, 125 IU HCG daily. Again, that settles the boys. Make sure you have a little bit higher than the minimum effective dose of HCG to keep testicular function. That microenvironment in the testicles is critically important to proper sexual function for men, period, but also on androgens. At the same time, 125 IU a day of HCG also provides a buffer for the prevention of the crash in estradiol. And then your standard 20 milligrams DHEA a day. Let me just kind of click out of that so it doesn't look like there's a red line going through everything. Maybe do that. It doesn't help. Okay, yeah. 20 milligrams DHEA per day. Now, in this playbook, which, again, is going to launch probably in the next 2 weeks, it got put on the back burner for a brief period due to the snowstorm and a whole bunch of other things, but I'm back to it. We describe the DHT-E2 axis. This is the most important dynamic for people to understand to dial in properly on HRT. Every protocol that you have, you want to factor in the DHT-E2 axis. High DHT, in range or sweet spot estradiol. Sometimes that's different between people, but usually 20 to 35 picograms per milliliter. Now, let's talk about the adjustment. So for a lot of folks, like that is going to provide sufficient enough testosterone, right? You're going to get a big peak at day 2, day 3, day 3.5, after which you're going to start troughing. You get some estrogen conversion the moment you inject. I mean, day of injection, you're going to start getting a good bit of estrogen conversion. But then the next day, you've got this block essentially. Okay, you've built up some estrogen. Now we're going to slow that conversion down because we don't want it going too high from that 200 milligram injection. We just want a little bit, and then we want to slow the conversion down. You're still going to convert to estradiol through that peak, but it's going to be substantially less, like 70, 80% less. So usually what that ends up doing is keeping people in that 20 to 35 range in estradiol. Let's talk about adjustments, right? Because it might not work the first time and it might not actually be like the perfect protocol. You might have to adjust the aromatase inhibitor. So I'm going to read this to you. Note, all cypionate protocols can be swapped with enanthate. Yes, there is a little bit of a difference in the half-life. Enanthate peaks quicker, troughs sooner, but it's not that significant of a difference. The playbook states not everyone is going to dial in on this protocol, but if you're one of those people that does respond favorably to aromatase inhibitors, this is key, this protocol allows a perfect synergy for sexual function. Some folks, no matter what happens, even if it's like 0.01 milligrams of anastrozole, they're going to have joint pain and loss of libido and erection problems. Those are people that just can't take AIs, okay? There are people that just can't take aromatase inhibitors. You could microdose it in a vodka solution and still they're having problems. Right? So if you're not one of those people, if you can tolerate AIs, this protocol is for you. Now, what you want to do regarding documenting the lab values is you want to run estradiol ultrasensitive, always run ultrasensitive. There's a big difference between the regular estradiol test and the estradiol ultrasensitive test. On days 3, and on day 7, okay, before you do the next injection. And the reason you do that is to determine the window of estrogen within a 7-day period. Look, just because Arimidex has a 48-hour half-life does not mean you should be determining the window of estrogen within 48 hours and then redosing. That is how you're going to crush your estrogen, be depressed with no libido, and probably have erectile dysfunction. Also, a lot of joint pain. That is so uncomfortable, by the way. You just don't want that. Now, you look at those bloods and you adjust the Arimidex dose accordingly, especially if there's sexual dysfunction in one way or the other. Now, this is where it's important to have nuance. If the E2 on day 3 after dosing Arimidex is between 40 and 60 picograms per milliliter, that's obviously too high, right? That's usually just too high for guys on TRT. Again, we need to be in a tight, narrow range of 20 to 35. That's where the erection quality, the libido, the sensation, the climax is all intact. Not inhibited by too much estradiol, not broken by too little estradiol. If it's between 40 and 60, you want to increase the Arimidex dose by 0.125 milligrams once a week. That would take you to 0.37 milligrams or so, not quite 0.5, a little bit higher than 0.25, 0.37. Then you run the iteration again, and you also run the labs. Now, that might then, saying you're at 40 to 60 of estradiol, increasing by 0.125 milligrams of Arimidex each week, that should get you in the 20 to 35 range in estradiol, and then you're perfectly dialed in. But if for some reason you overshoot that extra 0.125 on top of your 0.25, the day after injection, takes the E2 to like 10 to 18, because, it could definitely happen that way. And you notice that erection quality is good, which it usually is around the 10 to 18, picograms per milliliter range. But libido is suffering and sensation is suffering. You're just not interested in sex. Then you'll want to reduce, this is the further adjustment, the anastrozole, the Arimidex dose, by 0.06 milligrams. Run that for a week, test the bloods, analyze your symptoms, go from there. Then instead of 0.37 milligrams, you're at 0.31, right? 0.31 or so. It's a little bit higher than the 0.25 and a little bit lower than 0.37. Right? These are the kinds of adjustments that, though painstaking, I promise you are worth it if you have the patience and you do it right. From there, if the numbers look okay, but sexual function isn't great, you just adjust the Arimidex dose in very, very small increments in weeks in succession. The next week, make one adjustment, run the labs. The next week, make another adjustment, run the labs. The goal obviously being getting to 20 to 35 picograms per milliliter in estradiol, where on 200 milligrams of cypionate, you're going to have enough DHT, right? So that settles the DHT estradiol axis right there. And you've got functional testicles with 125 IU of just over there of HCG right there. Now, that protocol isn't going to work for everybody. But the people that can tolerate AIs, it's part of the Long-Ester decision tree, right? So it should be factored in, especially if people go down to 100 milligrams a week. You're not anabolic. Okay, the E2 is in range, the sexual function starts working, and you want to explore higher doses with estrogen control. The first pillar, right? The first part of the Long-Ester decision tree is high dose with an aromatase inhibitor or a DHT derivative. If you can make that work, right? And you've got to make the adjustments on the Arimidex, and you've got to use the Arimidex the day after injection. You've got to run the labs, and you have to be patient. This could be a 4 to 6 week process. It could be an 8-week process. Therein is a great template to dial in this crazy Long-Ester. The truth is, if you can get it right with Cypionate, you can have a pretty amazing protocol. For me, with 168 milligrams a week, this is injected IM with a 5/8 inch needle in the upper glute every day, with 200 IU of HCG and 0.25 milligrams of Arimidex every 7 days. My estrogen lands square at 30. Square at 30. And the sexual function is phenomenal. There's only a few ways to dial in testosterone cypionate. We've talked about a lot of them. I'm going to break it down further, in this product that's upcoming and launching. But high dose with an aromatase inhibitor, approached carefully, approached this way. Monitoring the labs is one great way to do it. Is it the best cypionate dose? Questionable. Because there's a lot of cypionate protocols that tend to work, a lot of templates from which to start that you can dial in carefully thereafter. But I wanted to break it down for you folks in case you're on the lower end, you can't figure it out. You're trying to figure out how to get the high androgens, but keep estrogen where sexual function stays in the zone. All right, a lot of the protocols that work for dialing in sexual function on testosterone cypionate are in the Mastering Testosterone Cypionate video course, so I created another course with cypionate specifically. Shows you how to break down protocols with AIs, with DHT derivative, high-dose protocols, low-dose protocols, anabolic ancillaries, DHT provider, testosterone cypionate, master failsafe. You should get that if you're just stubborn and don't want to switch from cypionate, just get this course. If you don't want to go at this stuff alone, this is all I do. Literally, my life is dialing in erections and libido for men on TRT, and I love doing it. Right now, I'm giving people a 30% discount on either the 3 or 6 month package. These are one-on-one programs with me where we're talking multiple times a week. I am engineering your protocols on an online TRT protocol tracker. We are discussing the feedback, making adjustments, and putting you to the place where you're dialed in permanently, where you can move on with your life and forget about the rigmarole of the dance of TRT and just be dialed in so you can move on and focus on other stuff. 30% off right now. Codes on the screen and down the description. You can book me in under a minute, livecortex.com. We're on the fact-finding call as soon as that next day, and then we begin. All right, only serious individuals who have the budget and are ready to do it, book at livecortex.com. Sometimes you need a whole boatload of stuff to experiment. That's why I created source list, a vetted list, right? You want a safe place to get the stuff you need, especially high potency DHT, which you really can't find anywhere. That's 20% off livecortex.com. Lastly, if you need to dial in on cream, some people are going to just not dial in on cypionate, period, right? And don't want to go through that whole dance and want to dial in faster. I mean, with cream, you're steady state in 2 to 4 weeks. You could dial in a cream protocol if you have the right strategy in a month, and then you're done. I break every single one of the protocols that work for sexual function and the logic for how to adjust in Mastering Testosterone Cream for Libido and Erections. You can get it 20% off right now, livecortex.com or down the description of this video. All right, my brothers in test. It's been another epic video. Thanks so much for being with me for all these videos. Like the video, it makes a huge difference to the algorithm. I'd really appreciate if you hit the like button. Otherwise, sub to the channel. If you're new here, we've been breaking this down for years, and we will forever in the time continuum. Otherwise, kick ass, rock on, enjoy the rest of your day, and I'll talk to you boys on the next one.